Alrighty, I'm going to call the meeting to order, and we'll start with the adoption of the agenda. Are there any additions, Mr. Grover?
No, I'll make that motion.
Okay, before you do, I have one.
Which one?
8.2 RMA uniquely rural.
That's 8.2.
Yes.
Point two.
Then Quentin, did you have?
The resolution you guys requested we draft, if we could go in camera and talk about that.
Okay, the camera will be on a resolution. Okay. And are there are no other additions? Okay, all in favor of Mr. Grover's motion?
Good.
Carried. Adoption of the minutes from the July 26th meeting. Everybody get a chance to read those? Mr. McKay?
I didn't see anything that, any areas or anything, so I'll move that we adopt.
Okay, good set of minutes, Marlene. I read them last night. Okay, all in favor? Carried. We're gonna be having a delegation shortly, but I'd like to wait for our other board members who are still coming so that they don't miss Mr. Wright's presentation. So we'll move into 5.1, the reports from the administration of ASB. Quentin, you could please?
So the public works brushing from last winter, we've done round one, we've hit every site. We were gonna start round two. We'll wait till after our discussions here shortly to talk about that. Weed inspections ongoing on land, including spending some time on Red Deer River. We will be pretty well all this week and probably a good part of next week before we're off Red Deer River. We're completing the finishing touches on 7 outstanding weed notices. And then we just issued 4 on Monday. Hand pulling white cockle, that's been my staff's worst nightmare this year with the moisture in the spring. It's been crazy. So we did some more on Township 38-0, 38-2. Range Roads 18-1 and 17-4. Pardon me. So yeah, because it's in flower, we have to pull before we can spray the green plants. So that's what we're doing.
May I ask questions as we go along?
Yep.
On your weed notices, you said you're working on 7 and there's 4 more new. Is that slightly higher for weed notices than most years?
Probably a little bit this time of year. Yeah, I would think so. Most of the time producers work with us very well to get things done. There's been a few that have been saying they're going to get to it, kind of busy, got things going on. And we've waited long enough that we have to issue to get it done. Understanding harvest is starting, but if it's not cleaned up now, it's going to be ugly next year.
Wait too long, they're all in seed and they're just spreading.
So, I mean, that's 3 of them is just, I'm trying to get there, I'm too busy, right? And the other ones are just, yeah, okay, but not really doing it. So
Okay, thanks.
which is, I guess, probably typical answers for us. You have the odd one that says take a hike, do what you want. I'm not going to do it, but most of the time it's,
Work with you, it's just they need a little help getting motivated.
yeah. So inspections are ongoing on all the lease lands. Spraying gravel pits is ongoing. We just, actually, we just pulled out a Schaff pit yesterday. And I just asked this morning, I can't remember which pit we went into this morning, but we've been pretty well just cycling those ones and making sure we're up on them. And, yeah, still receiving quite a few calls on dead and dying trees, possibly drought related from last year. Keep in mind, we've just finished, or we're up to now a month without any kind of decent moisture. So starting to see some effects of that. Working with Alberta Transportation, we had 2 sites of leafy spurge, both on Highway 56, one between the county shop and Stetler, and then one just north of Township Road 39-3. Both sites are right on the shoulder of the asphalt and with about a meter big, so not big enough for Alberta Transportation to contract MCon to come out with their spray trucks. So they said on something that small, we just do the work for them. So we pulled it, we sprayed it, bill it. And weed inspections and cleanup on Red Deer River, mainly targeting common tansy and yellow toad flax.
And on the river, are you finding the water level average? Or is it a higher?
We're slightly below normal now.
Well,
No, actually, we're still above average for this time of year, but it's the flow is starting to slow down, but we're still able to motor along pretty good. We got on late this year, but we had to wait for the flows to drop.
because I heard there was record snowfall in the mountains this year, and now with the heat, I'm sure it's,
Along with the rainfall we had,
yeah,
it was
rainfall.
pushing our flow rates high enough that our motor wasn't strong enough to go upriver. So we had to wait for the flows to slow down. Yeah. So yeah, here's some pictures. White cockle, we're deadheading the flower, so we're taking the flower off, leaving the green and just spraying the green, but we have to get rid of the flower. That's where the seeds are. White cockle, common tansy, scentless chamomile, oxeye daisy, those types of plants, when you spray them, the plant is smart enough to set seed and produce next year. So that's what that picture is. A couple of pictures of that anyways.
That, on the fence line, where that the white flower that's there?
Yeah, that white flower, that's white cockle,
Yeah.
which looks dangerously close to cow cockle, which is a nothing weed.
Looks like that's $1 spent on fence. Should spend a little on spray maybe.
Red Deer River, here's our crews. I usually send out a team of 2 or a team of 3 depending on workload. So the first little bit, what we do is we zip up and down the river, pinning our points, trying to determine how big a cruise to send out. And it's kind of hard to tell on page 6, but that yellow flower you can see in the background, that is common tansy on our banks, or the province's banks, I guess.
When you have a real abundance, like that there, do they have to see them to do more or not? Like you have set dollars to do the river, right? Correct.
Yeah, they give us $5,000 to do.
But will they give you more if there's more there?
It depends on if it's
That looks like a real mess to me.
$5,200, they'll pay it, but if it's $7,000, they say, well, we topped you at $5,000.
Oh, yeah.
But
5 isn't a lot of money.
this year, if we've estimated right, we should be probably $4,700 worth of work. It's mainly labor is the work. The herbicide we use, Milestone, because we can use it within 1 meter of water. You use half a liter per hectare. So in a backpack, we're putting in, I think the calculation was 11 milliliters in a backpack. So you're not using very much herbicide. It's mainly the labor and the mileage to get there. So then, Taste of the Heartland Farm to Fork Tour. This is the crew that helped me out this year. Going from site to site, setting everything up, making sure everybody had beverages and snacks and lunch.
Are the employees? All of them?
These are all county employees, yeah. Actually, they're all ag staff except for one.
Guy in the front.
Oh, yeah. At least he's got it on the right way around.
This time.
Some of the other politicians.
So that's stop number one at Dylan Benjamin's, Benjamin Lawson Farms, south of town. Ironically enough, quite a bit of interest. So he does silaging, right? Cereal silaging and corn silage. He's planting turnips with his oats. He talked about their horse breeding and training program, and they're going to get into dog breeding. But when they talked about silage and how good it went up this year and that sweet bitter taste, there was actually quite a bit of interest to taste some, which I didn't think they were serious about. But during lunch stop, I had to send a truck back to Benjamin's to get a Ziploc bag of silage because there was 12-ish people that wanted to try it. So that was interesting.
How many people showed up?
On the bus, there was 44. 34 of those were doing the bus tour and the long table dinner, and there was 10 that chose just the tour. But by lunch, there was 4 that were interested. They didn't even know about the long table dinner, so there was 4 that were asking for tickets. We actually found some that somebody couldn't make. So 44, which is a good number. That's one bus. I had room for about 8 more on the bus, but it was a good number.
Whereabouts the area? Like what type of area?
Edmonton, Ponoka, Red Deer, Calgary, Lethbridge, Lloydminster. I think there was a Vermilion, all over.
Urban, rural,
Yes, both.
quite a mixture.
And then we had local town of Stettler, local county of Stettler, all over.
There was the long table supper sold out. There was 100 set for the long table.
And then the next stop, so we went up to Murray and Karen Wallens with their Heartland alpacas. And they actually had a table of products that they've made that they were selling as well. And quite the interest in the alpacas. There's actually a couple llamas in there as well. They were talking about the conversation around predator control came up, using those types of animals for your sheep for livestock protection. So that was good. Then we went for lunch with Taskin Aerial Applicators, which was our last stop of the day, sponsored lunch for us, which was nice. Didn't even ask for it. They just wanted to help out. So that was good. So we then stopped at Fireside Winery, which even a lot of our locals forgot we had and didn't realize that there's only 2 employees working at this winery. And quite amazed with how much picking has to get done in the process. There's only 2 of them doing it. So that was good to see. Definitely opened some eyes for, like I say, like our local people that didn't realize that we have a winery and it's all prairie berry. There's not a grape in there. And then our last stop, which was supposed to be our lunch stop, but he got called out to desiccate some peas. The Tasman aerial applicators came, they brought a plane. You guys were able to go up and look at it and understand the regulation, why they do what they do, how accurate or some of the myths behind spraying over schools, cross roadways, whatnot. And then he actually took the plane up and showed us how low he couldn't spray because he had finished desiccating a pea field like hours earlier, but he showed us just how low he sprays at, and he shows us his teardrop turn and how tight they come around. And that was quite a hit. People were quite amazed, talking about turning off certain nozzles. These planes have boilers on them, so they can inject oil into the engine and produce a bunch of smoke, and it helps tell them wind drift, where they're applying. They can actually see what they're doing. They talk to their ground crews lots. It was they did quite a good job presenting what they do and killing a bunch of myths. And we could have stayed there another hour, but we were out of time and had to get him to the long table dinner. So these guys were really good to work with. And they were happy to they were actually supposed to bring a helicopter and a plane, but their helicopter got contracted out to do some forestry work just before this event, so they couldn't bring the helicopter, which would have been neat to see. I've never seen a helicopter up close spraying, right? So I did not include the video. I can send it and we can show it, but when he lifted off, he just sprayed over the airport, or didn't spray, sorry, but he got down to where the levels, the height he sprays at, and with his smoke, it was just really interesting to see how that all turns out.
So how did they do the distance rights? Do they use GPS on their plane?
Yeah, they've got onboard computers, but it depends on how you want it done. He says they can work with you. If you've got a high clearance sprayer, you can do the outside rounds of your land. You tell him how wide you went, and then he'll do a flyby and mark that into his computer and then pick up the inside. Or he can fly a fence line and spray one side of the fence and work his way in to create his buffer and go back and forth. He's got, I didn't take pictures of inside his cab, but he's got all the computers and software he needs to make sure he stays on your quarter.
If I'm not mistaken, I think years ago, that they used to actually fly people down on the ground.
Yeah.
Go that route.
You're right. Years ago, they did used to have a guy stand with flags, 2 on each end. Stand with a flag and you'd hold it and you'd wait. And as they got close, then you'd run so you didn't get sprayed on. That's pretty old school technology. That's no different than old school. We used to use our hand to mix up the herbicide.
Or you didn't get hit with a wheel.
Right?
Or he tried to run you down.
Well,
I done that job. I didn't like that job.
he was spraying like 20 feet off the ground. Or that was his flight path. I shouldn't say spraying. He didn't spray, but his flight path was 20 feet off the ground. Get to the end and he'd come up, do his turn, drop back in and go back again. Pardon me. Yeah, it was really neat to see. But it's all, they've got software in those planes that he knows he can turn nozzles on and off depending on what the wind is doing, or fence line, or sensitive crop next to what he wants to spray.
That's David Lister.
No, this is Corey Cousins, Corey and Hope Cousins. They do have, and I didn't catch his name, they have another guy that's part of his mixing crew who's actually from Stellar. And he's not that, like, he's just out of school, I think 2 years. He's got his applicator's license. He's going into aviation school in the off season. He'll go to aviation school and he's going to be part of their team. And he's from here.
Lister flies for lots of airline companies.
Yeah, he's not, I don't think he's flying for the airline company anymore. He's just doing the application. They made the application north for the runway, but they,
Wetaskiwin aerial sign is on this.
yeah, no, I think they're tied somewhere.
Any other questions for Quentin on his report? Mr. Jender?
Going back to the winery, like there is a problem area there, like with the weeds. Has that been taken care of? Like,
It's an ongoing thing, but it's been controlled this year and we'll attack it again next year. It's Canada thistle,
Yeah.
so it's tough to get 100% control because of how easy it spreads.
That was their biggest concern, like they do all the weeding. Thank you very much.
Okay, Mr. Grover?
I'll move it.
Okay. Mr. Grover has moved the report. We accept it as presented. All in favor? Carried. I think now we better get into our guest presenter. And
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I apologize for being late. I'm a little bit tardy, but I had a change in plans on my farm, so.
yeah, well, we're trying to wait for our presentation until we get our board. We're still missing one board member, but we will start. And I guess, well, Mr. Wright is on. Welcome, Mr. Wright.
Hey, how you doing?
Great, thank you. We're going to go around and do some introductions of our board here and our staff that are present today. Okay, and
Oh, Justin, come lately. How you doing?
I will start with Marlene, please.
Gender, good morning.
Okay, good morning.
Dave Grover, board member.
Justin Stevens, board member. My apologies, everyone.
Les Stuhlberg, ASB Board Chair.
James Nyberg and board member.
Quentin Beaumont, Manager of Agriculture Operations.
Andrew Bushik, Director of Municipal Services.
Michelle Hoover, Legislative Assistant.
Dan Alvisser, Manager of Construction.
Larry Clark, board member, going to be leaving here shortly, so.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, Mr. Wright, and if you would start your presentation for us, please. We're
Sure.
interested.
I'll just let you guys know who I am. I'm Ralph Wright. I work with Agriculture, Forestry, and Rural Development, and I run the Alberta Climate Information Service. We have a network of about 180 stations through the agricultural areas, and we bring in data from over 470 stations province-wide, and all of it's hourly and available up to the last hour on our Alberta Climate Information Service. So we're going to look at a little bit of that today, and we'll take a brief look at how this season unfolded, and we'll look at 2021 in a historical perspective all the way back to 1901, and we'll even look at some Calgary data back as far as 1884. So just to give you guys some idea about climate variability, trends, if you want to call them that we've had. And also, if there's time, I can go and show you some tools that we have for you to look at trends in your own area for up to 70 different climate metrics all the way back to 1961. So how much time are we allocating for this?
Typically about anywhere from 15 minutes to half an hour, but
Okay, well, if you guys want, I can probably go for an hour, and I can also go for 15 minutes. So you just let me know when to stop, or if you want more, I can do more.
Well, let's
I'm just gonna.
shoot for within the half hour then. If you
Okay,
can.
that sounds good. Okay, so you seeing my screen now? Let me just call up some maps. Sorry, wrong ones. Okay, can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Is it nice and clear? I noticed on my end some of the stuff you guys, can you guys read this here, this font? I'm just sort of curious how things
Yeah,
are.
we can. It looks good on our screen.
Okay, great. So the very first map set I'm showing you is precipitation averages for each month from the period 1991 to 2020. This is a pretty wonderful map set that I use to understand some of the patterns that Alberta typically has. There's 12 months, January through to December. And remember, these are most recent 30-year normals. So perhaps the best place to start here is in October. And we see that really October marks the beginning of what we call Alberta's dry season. Kind of like, we're like Africa in a lot of ways. We do have a dry season, we have a wet season, but we also have a cold season, which is winter. So the cold season kicks off quite dry in October. Stettler is about, so are we talking mostly about Stettler now? Because I know you noticed you guys are up to Wetaskiwin and all over the place. Should we make this focus on Stettler?
Yeah, we're the county of Stettler, so that would be the proper focus.
Okay, good. All right. So October, typically you guys are getting about 15 to 20 millimeters on average. Of course, this varies greatly across all the Octobers you've had, but this dry season extends right until March, and February is your driest month. And a lot of times in the winter, people are saying, "Oh, it's been so dry this winter. Is there a drought?" And winter really isn't a time to worry about drought. February is a great example of this. Typically you're only getting 10 to 15 millimeters. So if you get 0 millimeters in February, it could be the driest February on record, but what does that really mean for water supply? Not a heck of a lot. In fact, in the winter, you get about 20 to 25% of your average annual precip in the 6 months, October through to March, and probably close to 50% through June and July. So what happens as we approach spring, we see the south starts getting wet first. And this wet spreads east and northward through April, but still April Stettler's pretty dry, sitting here around 20 to 25. And then May comes around and we start to see things start getting wetter, more so towards the end of the month. But typically we're getting a doubling of precipitation. April is at 20, May is close to 40 to 50, and June is in the 80 to 100 mark. July is about the same, maybe a little bit wetter, well, a little bit drier, depends where, there's quite a gradient across Stettler. June's your wettest month. And then, of course, we descend and get drier and drier as we head towards October. So these are your precipitation patterns. One thing that's kind of interesting here is if you were to look at the amount of moisture that's received from January until June, Lethbridge would beat out most parts of the province. In fact, a lot of southern Alberta is wetter in that 6-month period through the normals. It's really July and August that makes southern Alberta what southern Alberta is. It gets very hot in July and August, and the taps for rain just simply turn off. And we've seen that this year. We see that pretty much every year. So we'll go to the next set. And this is a little snip I've taken from the Alberta Climate Information Service. There's a map here where you can check all your stations. These are the stations that are currently operating in your area. I've plotted precipitation accumulations, which are these stair-step lines for all of these stations from April until August 22nd. And I've also included a family of normals. So this is how precipitation normally marches up. And there's an inflection. You guys start a drying hitting kind of the drier cycle, your descent into October around the 18th of July. But this is this year. So we started out pretty dry. I think there was an awful lot of worry left over from last year that we were going to have, back-to-back dry years. And, it was quite a bit below normal. Even into June, we had this nice we had a long stretch of dry weather as people were seeding. Probably added to a lot of fears. But then the taps just turned right on. And we were well above normal by the end of July. And then, like so many other years, and I think there's a lesson here, this isn't abnormal if we go through the meteorological record where we get these dry spells ending abruptly with wet spells, and then beginning dry spells again. So this really illustrates what we see historically is just this, it's basically a fight between weather systems. We always say normal weather is just the average you get as you move between extremes. And basically, cold air masses are fighting with warm air masses and they're colliding, and that's what's really making our weather. There is no real normal per se. This is the stretch of dry that you guys have been experiencing now that are probably hurting the pastures quite a bit. But for the entire growing season, most of these stations are still above normal. Now, that's not doing your pastures any good now because a lot of this moisture was here, but I suspect the crops are doing fairly well and maturing. Is that safe to say?
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's go to the next map. And we're going to take a look here. I'll just back up one more. So I'm going to take a look at this wet cycle here, or this wet period between June and kind of the beginning of July. This is the wettest 30 days. How wet was it? Well, we produce a series of maps that you guys can download. We produce them pretty much every week. I'm publishing about 50 maps. And this is one.
Ralph, can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah, you guys, please interrupt me anytime you want. I tend to go on a roll here, but it's great if we can.
I don't want to interrupt you when you're on a roll, but just one question. Have you ever overlaid the temperatures with that as well? Because we've went through a hot spell, and as much moisture as we've got, it seemed to get sucked right up because of that hot spell. And I wonder if you have ever overlaid that into to see, like if we go for 2 weeks without moisture, but it only gets to, 22 or 23 during the hottest day, then it's not a big deal. But when it's 31, it just seems to suck the moisture right out of everything. So I'm just wondering if you've
Yeah.
ever overlaid that.
Yes, we do that in several ways. I've got a map set similar to what I'm going to show you soon that does exactly that. I don't have it presented here, but near the end of this deck, I've got a soil moisture map that is basically taking into account precipitation, runoff, evapotranspiration, crop growth, temperature, even solar radiation and length of day. So that's what we produce as a soil moisture map. And we do that relative to a 60-year normal, so you can see what the current levels are and what they are relative to normal.
Okay, thank you.
So the short answer is yes. Okay, so this is a 30-day precipitation accumulation map for June 5th to July 4th. That was pretty much the wettest 30-day period you had. And we see Stettler is right in here. And you guys had anywhere between 150 to about, this is 200 millimeters over here, 200, this is 150 to 175. And just west of you, close to Red Deer, there was over pretty much close to 300 millimeters in that 30-day period. And I think that was really what saved a lot of people. Some may have been flooded out. There was some localized flooding. I'll say here, these weather stations are about 30 to 40 kilometers apart. So, you know, we probably missed some of the big storms that may have caused localized damage. But in general, these were the distributions of the rains. Meanwhile, you know, something to note here too is we've got the special areas here, 50 to 75 millimeters. And what, 250 kilometers away, you've got an exceedingly wet area, exceedingly dry area, very dry up north. And this is typical that we see in Alberta is we can't say Alberta was wet or dry because there's, in very short orders of space, you have big changes, and also you have these big changes in short orders of time, such like we've seen since it's dried out. So we'll go to the next map. These were the accumulations relative to long-term normal. Now I'm gonna zoom in here. This legend is something I'm gonna use a lot in the next little while, and we rank all of these time periods relative to the driest. So pink is the 1 in 50 year dry. Purple is a 1 in 50 year wet. So basically it's only happened once since about 1961. That's as far back as we go. And then each one we divide in half. So the next category is 1 in 25, 1 in 12, 1 in 6. And the near normal, you know, how do you define normal? Well, we say 1/3 of the time it's too dry, 1/3 of the time it's too wet, 1/3 of the time it's kind of in between. So that's how we define it. Somewhat arbitrary, but suffice it to say.
Ralph, can you zoom in a little bit on that map for us?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. That's
right about there. How's that?
Yeah, we're just trying to see the county lines.
You see them?
Okay, so their county lines are right here. Okay.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, no, that's good.
So you guys were kind of smack dab in the middle of some extremes, I would say. Very, very high rainfall in the west. And, you know, here's the other thing. This is relative to normal. So, you know, County of Paine Earth is typically drier than, say, it is in Red Deer. So this doesn't necessarily say there was more moisture here. It was just wetter than normal. About once in 50 years, that corner of Paine Earth would see a June that wet. Okay, now we're going to go to the next one. So during that time frame, so you guys had all that moisture, you had a dry spring, it was really cold. These are the 90-day average temperatures. So how often do we get a cold spring like this? And you can download these maps and see, and I put them here. Again, this same category, same idea, but basically from April 8th to July 6th, you guys were sitting generally at about 1 in 6 to 12 year lows. We've got 1 in 12 to 25 year here and 25 to 50 year lows here. So you know, 1 in 25 year lows either side of you, which puts you guys probably, you know, this category is 6 to 12, but I'd say you're higher on the 1 in 12 year. Once in 12 years, or, you know, 6 times in 60 years, you'd see a spring that cold. These are great maps for kind of understanding, how bad was it, how good was it kind of deal. We go to the next map. Now, these are the 60-day average temperatures as of August 24th, and we see this massive swing. And now, parts of Stettler County over the last 60 days, this doesn't even include the last 15, which is, it's been exceptionally warm for the end of August. Here about once in 12 to 25 years, you'll see this June to August, this warm. And so we've gone from a cold, wet period to a very dry, warm period. Again, not so unusual if we look at the meteorological record, which we'll be looking at soon. If you look at the 60-day accumulations relative to normal for that same period, so you guys will have a July and August this dry on average about once in 6 to 12 years. Some areas, closer to 1 in 6 years, some areas higher. In probably 1 in 15-year category here is what I'd estimate. And, normal to the east and even normal to the west, relatively speaking. Some areas did even worse. Wheatland County, we've got some 1 in 50-year lows. Special areas suffered a lot this year, and as well as the Peace Country's been quite dry, but they had a heck of a lot of snow early on, which I think helped them a lot. So this leaves us to answer your question. Do you ever overlay temperature? Well, we overlay temperature, precipitation, and more to give you soil moisture reserves relative to long-term normal. This is kind of your bank account against drought and dry spells. And as of August 22, for a spring wheat crop rooted down to 120 centimeters, most of your counties sitting in the 1 to 6 to 1 to 12 year lows for soil moisture this time of year. Any questions at this point? No? Okay. All right. So now we're going to go back. This was kind of an overview of this year. We're going to go throw 2021 into perspective here. So what I've done here is I've taken the last 120 years and put them on all these nice little maps. So this is 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013. These are the yearly precipitation accumulations relative to long-term normal. 2021 is standing out like a sore thumb. In fact, one may argue, depending on how long you've lived, this is probably the worst year in living memory that we have for widespread drought across the province now. We can go anywhere in the province and say, yeah, it was worse than 67 here, but we're talking in generalities. And here's Stettler. So for the year of 2021, you guys are sitting at about a once in 25 to 50 year low. Now, of course, the timing of precipitation and the temperature is exceedingly important to really reflect what happened to the crops. But something interesting here, there's a few things. Basically, a long dry spell started in the south third of the province in about 2017 and went largely uninterrupted except for 2020 and culminated in 2021. And, I think we can thank our lucky stars that this year came along and really broke this cycle because the land was really, really primed for, extremely serious drought this year, but that has not manifested itself, so that's pretty good. And if we go back through the meteorological record, generally what I've found, it's kind of biblical, it's interesting, but 7 years is about the longest stretch you're going to get things like this happening. Typically maybe 5 or 6 years is quite unusual. If we stand back and take a look at this map, it's salt and peppered with oranges and blues, and one may argue that it's pretty well balanced with respect to dry and wet in any given year. And again, we can bring our attention to very dry areas co-located with very wet areas. So we're going to go look at 2021, go all the way back to 1902, and see how 2021 ranks to some of the dry times we know about in the 30s and even the 20s. And, I think it's good if you guys understand what I'm going to show you here is it was probably drier than what we've seen in the last 20 years through the early part of the century. And most of us, starting about the 50s, arguably the 60s, right through to the late 90s, lived in quite an unusual period where there was a lot more wet weather year over year than we've seen throughout this entire century. So, I would argue that was probably abnormal. And we have a long period before the mid-century that was quite dry, and now we've got this last 20 years that is somewhere between the wet of the mid-century and the extreme dry at the beginning of the century. So here's 2010 to 2021. I'm going to now go to 1902 and 1913, and now look at all of a sudden we get quite a bit of dryness across the province. Now you'll notice here, we've got some funny lines, some weird shapes. Well, that's because we didn't have a lot of weather stations back then. So these aren't nearly as accurate a portrayals as what's happened province-wide as what we have today with nearly 500 weather stations going into making these maps. We're probably looking at 30 weather stations. And not all of these would be operating year-round. So that's why the maps are kind of funny, and we don't get really good comparisons of what happened. But we do see very dry years following wet years, following dry years. And again, this is quite normal. We saw that this season, we see this in a year, and we even see this in decades too. So this is 1902 to 1913. Arguably 1905 was just as bad as 2021. 1910 was just as bad as 2021. So in the space of 10 years, we had two of those years. This is 1914 to 1925, and I put 2021 here in perspective. 1917 possibly rivaled that year, but was on the heels of a very, very wet year. 1918, very, very dry again, probably like 2021, 2 years in a row. And even 2022. So in this 12-year period, we had some pretty dry weather. Might be comparable to 2021. Now, we're going to go through the 26 to 37, the dirty 30s. I don't know if Alberta was hit quite as hard in the dirty 30s as perhaps it was the decade before that, but 1929 comes up as a very dry year, following a pretty dry year. And here's that nice stretch of dry weather, 4 years here, another stretch of 4 years here where it's been quite dry in some areas in a row, and then again 2021. Now, this is where things start getting interesting, and this is where living memory starts coming. You'd have to be a 100-year-old person would be about 20 years old here, probably just sort of cognizant of the weather, maybe being able to remember some of this stuff. So we're going to go into 38 to 49, and we can see this wet weather is starting to creep in. We're starting to lose a lot of these, widespread dry year. And this becomes even more apparent as we move from 1950 to 1961. Sure, we've had some bad bouts. 60. This is where I think most reasonable memory comes in, talking to people you see on the street and stuff. What was it like? The next decade. This is where a lot of us grew up, 62 to 73. Look how wet that period was. And this actually is 74 to 85, not a lot of drought, lots of wet years. Cottages were going up on lakes. We were getting used to lake levels being a certain way. Well, this was after quite a long period of, wet weather. And this even continued right through to 97. So, I kind of wonder sometimes, our lake and river levels, we started surveying mostly in the 60s. Were these taken at a time that was anomalous, or is this time anomalous? And I don't think we have an answer to that, but it's certainly worth thinking about when we're looking at historic records that only go back to this wet period that we've just seen. Maybe this wet period is truly anomalous, and we're sort of using a yardstick that may not be appropriate, especially when it comes to long-term planning and stuff. But a lot of the long-term planning is routed in this mid-century wet spell.
So Ralph, going into long-term planning with what the trends we've been seeing, can you kind of estimate, I know the Farmer's Almanac does a fairly good job of seeing what our weather's going to be, but what about from your trends? Can you kind of predict to say that, you know, the next 2 years are going to be wet or dry, or would you go down that road?
No, I would not. This is a good example, I think. So here's the drought in 2001, okay? So we're starting in 98, a wet year, a drier year, an even drier year, and now an even drier year. Oh my God, you know, things are drying out, everybody. We better do something, some management thing, some big program, I don't know, spend a bunch of money, try to mitigate this. But look what happened in 2002. It just ended abruptly. And that's the kind of point I'm trying to make here is that we
It
can't.
ended abruptly for some, not for everybody. That's not,
That's
2002, we did not see, we could have taken trucks down to High River, I think, and picked up some of that water.
That's right, absolutely. But then, okay, so now 2002, it gets wetter, and now you've got to, you know, yeah. Anyway, we can take a look at this in more detail because I have graphs. You know, these you get a little confused looking at these because we're all looking at different regions of the map, making different conclusions, right? As we, you know, zero in on different areas and see different things. We do have the Alberta Climate Information Service allows you to click on a station and look at graphs of each one of these things at a single location, so you're not muddying the waters by all this sort of peripheral vision stuff that's going on. So here, anyways, so we had this wet cycle, and now we're tending towards, you know, somewhat more balanced approach. However, the drought of 2001 and 2002 will live in memory along with 2021. 2009, another bad year, but we're getting a bit more of a balance here. Now we go 2010 through to 2021, and there's your 5 dry years. But compared to what we saw in the early part of the century, I would argue there's a little bit more moisture province-wide if Alberta was a pail and we could collect it all. Now, back to planning. There's other products on the website. This is the 60-day highest precipitation accumulation. I generated these in 2018. But, you know, if you're looking for flood potential, you know, what's the worst it can be? We've taken the highest 60-day window in each and every year and mapped it to see how wet can it be. Well, Camrose, which isn't too far away from you guys, got 400 millimeters in 60 days. You guys, the highest Stetler's had is in around the 310 mark. So, you know, think about planning for 300 millimeters in 2 months. And actually the 90-day, add another 100 onto that. So you can get, you know, an extremely wet period for 90 days. It's in around the 400 to possibly even 500 millimeter mark for you guys. And this does include most of that wet period we saw. So it's probably a good estimate of how bad the wet can get. Now, that being said, I'm going to take you to another graph here. And this is Calgary. So 1884 to 2021. And this is important because this is perspective. You know, this is 1955. So here's our, you know, kind of walking on the street, living memory, people we can talk to. And we can gain inferences from this, from our perspective. And, you know, we would say something, you know, precipitation's highly variable, blah, 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 all that sort of stuff. But if we look back over a longer period of time, this no longer makes sense to say. You know, what's going to happen here over the next 50 years? I don't think we really know, but we see that this period ended fairly abruptly. I don't think anyone saw that coming. And, you know, another thing for perspective, 10, 15, 20 years, how long does it take? Well, we had some of the driest, the driest year ever was here, and I think with whatever this is, 1893. And we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years where it got wetter and wetter and wetter. We had the driest year ever, 12 years followed by the wettest year ever, never to be seen again. Here's the drought of 2002, 2001 for Calgary. They weren't hit quite as hard as you guys, but you can see these guys had 4 droughts that were equivalent to 2002 all in a row that then trended to a wetter and wetter and wetter regime, only to drop off a cliff and go into the early part of the century that was quite dry indeed.
Ralph,
Driest time. Yeah,
Ralph, is that
sorry.
just precipitation, or is it
That's
also?
just precipitation, that's correct. Yeah. So
So-
we're not looking at evaporative demand here or anything.
And nothing as far as Calgary getting water from and part of the flooding with High River was the snow melt in the mountains that,
This is just a rain gauge in Calgary.
okay. Not
Okay,
even a
so
snow gauge
yeah,
then.
it would be so that each one is how much was measured in Calgary in the rain gauge, snow gauge.
Okay.
So these are precipitation totals, just basically how does annual precipitation vary. And the real take-home message here is it's highly variable. And just because we had a dry year this year doesn't mean we're going to have a dry year next year. We don't really know. And I've come to the conclusion that, this year's a good example again. The weather of last month, last week, last year is not a good predictor of the weather next week, next month, next year. And I think we saw that this year too. Did anybody see this wet June coming? And then while it was, raining cats and dogs, did anyone see the hot August we were going to get? I don't know. I didn't find anybody that did. So I think the take-home message here is that weather is exceptionally variable. And the only way to really plan for it is to understand that it's variable and look at the variability it's giving us. To really appreciate that you can't hedge. I think you need to take the whole record into account and expect that it may repeat itself again. And again, this doesn't go back any more than 150 years ago. 10,000 years ago, we had big cave bears and animals that, nightmares are made out of that weighed, 3-4 times more than the wildlife we see today, right? I'm not a paleontologist, so I don't know whether that 3 or 4 is correct, but you can bet your bottom dollar this environment supported a lot different, animals were bigger and even different. So, what's it going to look like? If we could go back 500-600 years ago, we had the Vikings, all sorts of stuff happened. So what's going to happen in the future? We can look to the past and know that pretty much anything can happen. So that being said, any questions at this point? And how far am I into this? Has anybody been keeping time?
I think probably if you can wrap it up in the next 5 to 7 minutes or so.
Okay, sure, let's do that. We'll go very quickly into 5 minutes. We'll go 5 minutes. So this is the Alberta Climate Information Service. We have a whole bunch of things, including radar up to the last 5 minutes. These are the stations that are currently operating around the province every hour. You can click on them. These things light up so you can look at temperatures. You can look at normal temperatures. We can look at growing degree days, corny units, potato degree days, all sorts of things, frost probabilities. We can even go back. Okay, so now we take a look at, you say precipitation variability. This is really neat. So we'll go to, where's Stetler? You guys are right there, right? So if we pick the yearly option here, all these things will light up, and you can go all the way back to the start date, 1961. And we can take a look at all of the June precipitations. How variable is June? I can click on this and voila, there's all your Junes over the last 60 some odd years. We have low at 13.4 and we got high at 221. So this gives you an idea of this yearly variation. Can you see any patterns and trends in this? You guys can go look at this on your own. The conclusion I came to was, yes, I could see patterns and trends until I plotted some random numbers that I began seeing patterns and trends into. And then I quickly realized that there aren't really any patterns and trends that I would consider to be bankable. Okay. The other thing you guys, so there's a lot of stuff here. Growing degree days, frost-free days. You know, last spring frost is a perfect example. You know, everybody's talking about a warming climate. So we'd expect the last spring frost, we'd expect this to end earlier. Well, we can go take a look at that. And you can see, oh, sorry, no, that's frost-free days. That's not the one I wanted. What is this? This did this to me earlier. Frost-free days, last spring frost. Sorry. Oh, interesting. Days of the year. No, sorry, something's wrong with this. This happened to me one before. I'm gonna have to look at this. Frost date. No, sorry, I gotta, yeah. There's some sequence of events. There's supposed to be a calendar that comes up here. Let me just refresh this. I wonder if there's some kind of funny error. Okay, we're gonna wrap this up very soon, you guys. Anyways, suffice it to say, for Stettler, it's looking like your frost in the last few years have actually becoming lasting longer. Let's see if I can get this happening now.
Yeah, that's what I would say.
961. No, it's not. I'm doing something wrong. Sorry. Anyways, so there's also one more section here that is kind of neat. You can look at climate normals. And, you know, if you guys want me back, I can go into a little bit more detail on this. Here's Divide Hills. It's kind of near you. Let me just go to Stettler, Big Valley, Warren, Rock Hills. Where's Stettler? Right there. Okay. So I'll close the map. This is really neat because this is 5-day precipitation accumulations. It's really showing you kind of how precipitation's distributed through the growing season. We can see that, so this is from the, you know, April 22nd, the average of the last 5 days from 1991 to 2022 was higher at this point in time, April 22nd. We can see that there seems to be some wave patterns, right, in April that are showing up in the normals. There's a bit of a dry spell that kind of emerges in the end of the second week in May. Typically, your wettest week is July 15th, and you've got this dry spell here in the end of July, which is followed by a bit of wet weather on average. So if you want to hedge, this is the place where you can start hedging, but it would be a long-term hedge. So lots of neat stuff here. Any questions?
I don't have any questions, but I really enjoyed the map because, or the series of maps and graphs, because to me, the trend I see is that Alberta is not getting continually drier, or Alberta is not getting continually wetter. It just fluctuates through the years. We get dry years followed by wet years, and that seems to be the pattern for the last over 100 years. So.
Yes, exactly. And you know, and that 100-year period tells us that, you know, you probably need to plan for 6 or 7 dry years, and you know, you've covered a lot of bases doing that. And then, you know, plan for the wet years too.
You can kind of see too on this map you're just showing us where, you know, typically you think that the pastures are done growing in August and September. It's not such as that as much as they're just getting less moisture. So makes you wonder if we were under some pivots, how much more we could grow out of that. Right? You know what I mean? Because
yes,
right. If you get the water is keen to everything, right? So.
Well, they say wars will be fought over water. That's the next one. This is neat too, because we can take the 61 to 90 period and overlay that. Oh, so those are the so the black. It just switched them around. Black is the most recent, 61 to 90. So we used to get more rain kind of the beginning of July, and now we're sort of getting our peak a little bit later, and the winters are a little more snow-free than they used to be.
Well, I kind of have a theory on that. Maybe our calendar needs to be adjusted because every year we go, maybe 365 and a half days isn't exactly what the seasons are meant to be. Maybe it's supposed to be only 360 days. I mean, you know what I mean? We could be offset every year we live, we could be offset by, a little bit and pushed away, right? So does spring come earlier, or is it just that May 1st has not what May 1st was in 1960, right? So
That's what this is showing. The sun pulses energy, the orbit's, not fully elliptical. There's all sorts of very, very, it's kind of like throwing 3 or 4 stones into a pond. And each one sets out a set of waves, and each one influences what happens on the ponds. And the waves collide in these areas and make bigger waves or no waves. So that's kind of what climate metrics is like. There's just so many different factors. You can't pin it on one thing. And they do unpredictable things when they're working in tech.
Okay, good. So, did you have anything else you wanted to share with us yet today, or save it for another presentation?
No, I think that's probably enough. I don't want to oversaturate you guys. If you want to do this another time, I'd be happy, and we can delve a little deeper into the website to see how the tools might help you guys do some planning or understand local climates. The website's used even by law enforcement. It's used to solve legal cases. You can get wins for herbicide drift, even for snow clearing, all sorts of neat things like that it can be used for.
fire department.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. That was great information you shared. I certainly enjoyed your presentation, and I'd like to thank you for giving your presentation to our board today. And we likely will call on your services again for more
great.
information. So thank you very much. And enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, you guys take it easy and enjoy your meeting. Take care.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye now. Okay. So
That was actually very interesting. That was good.
I like the long-term trends of that. Okay, so now we can get back to our meeting. We'll move to 6.1, roadside spraying. That's council's request for information piece. So, who's going to start this one, Quentin or the councilor?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Do you have? Okay.
I would throw it back to the board, and they're the ones that requested, so there were some questions that were, I'm supposed to get some questions from what I understand from,
Who made the request?
I guess, Ernie, do you have something to start this conversation?
Put this on previously, but I never.
I think we carried this over from.
this is from the last council.
Until now.
Well, I just thought perhaps there was something to develop. So you're just basically getting back to us from last council, but
This was brought up from last council meeting, and there was some talk, I wasn't at last council, there was some talk about it, and then there was some questions that were gonna come to this meeting for me. I don't have those questions.
okay. Well, David or
Okay, go ahead, Ernie. You can go first, because I'm gonna be like this ride guy. I might be here for 2 hours.
okay, go ahead, Mr.
Why would we stop spraying them roads? I have no idea.
The biggest concern that has been brought up is like with the spraying of some of these trees and then. Hello?
Finally got Ernie to be quiet. Yeah, I know.
Oh,
Okay, there we go.
I guess over times, like we have been having requests, say like for concerns, say like with residents, why are we spraying some trees? Large trees, Andrew has some pictures here that I picked up this morning. And so like it's something that, is there really any consistency to what we are doing? Also, I asked Dan to come in, okay, if we do spray these trees, is it gonna be more beneficial to spray these trees, kill them, and then go in with the mulchers and mulch them up? That is not my fire on it, but I just wanna see, okay, how are we going to handle these trees? Because a year or two ago, it was happened down in Lime or Indian area where they had sprayed the trees. There were concerns back then. I'm just kind of wondering, okay, what type of follow-up? What is the long term? What are we really focusing on how to handle these trees? And yes, trees are a bloody weed in the wrong places. I just want to say, okay, like how can we handle these trees or these weeds and handle them properly?
I guess it depends on what you consider proper. I mean, that's the question that this board has to make.
But it is,
And Mr. Grover, not to step over, but I really, it was brought up to myself as well that this was, but I mean, it's an economic situation for us. Do we, like I said, there's options for getting weeds. We could hire 200 kids or young adults or people to go pick weeds out of the ditch all summer long. I'm not sure that the taxpayer of the county of Stettler is willing to pay for that kind of service. We have an economical way of dealing with weeds in our ditch, and that is a spray. Like you said, Mr. Gender, trees are a weed in the wrong place. I personally think they're a weed in the ditch. They don't help our road structure. They don't help us to put snow in there. They don't help us in any way. If you want a tree, you should put it on your own property. If it was my suggestion, every ditch would be 100% clear of every tree. There is no reason to have a ditch or a tree in the ditch. And I know there's many people in my area that would disagree with me, but at the same time, they're not the ones trying to plow the roads. They're not the ones that are trying to maintain the roads and you can see it in my area where there's a bunch of these, back up one. If that right there in my area, you can see how it shadows over the road and that road is soft. And because the moisture, the snow catch on it, the sun never gets to dry the road out and that shoulder of that road is soft. Now, if you're plowing snow and you're trying to wing it back, again, it's a pain in the keister. So in my opinion, economically, we have a way to get rid of the trees. Brushing, we could triple our brushing program. Again, at budget time, we haven't made that decision. What we have done is said, to instruction to our Public Works and our Ag Service Board, deal with the trees how you will, using chemical and some brushing to deal with it. So, not sure we should be chastising them for doing something that we told them to do. Sorry, Mr. Grover.
Oh, that's fine.
Go ahead, Mr. Grover.
I hate having a bad day. I gotta agree with Mr. Nyberg. These spray them, then you kill them, then you shred them. But I think if we have to, we get another shredder. But we have a forestry header that we spent, what, 70,000 or whatever dollars on for that track hole, and have we used it in the last year?
The brushing head for the excavator?
Quite a bit all winter long for brushing.
Okay.
Yeah, it's going,
Well, then you got away with that, Dan. You have a way to get rid of these taller trees. It just shreds. I've seen it work. It works wonderful. You can, that track hole just shreds them like crazy. And maybe we should have two of those little guys with a Bobcat with a shredder on the front of them, because this is our right of way. And I think you're definitely right. Wherever you get the trees out of the ditch, and if people want to plant trees on their property, there's programs where Quentin gives them a deal on buying trees if they want them, put them on their own property. But on this year, you're looking after everybody's property, way they get to town, way they haul their grain, way they do business, they run a business, or they go to a gas well or whatever. And we have to plow these roads. And it's time I think we have to do more, a little bit more. I actually got a few spraying requests that I'll leave with you, Mr. Quentin, after the thing. One is a sign on a bad corner, it's covered by trees.
Every one of these counselors in here have had a request from a farmer to brush trees because they can't get their header down the road. Every one of us has. So,
And softness on the road, and they go into the grade and everything else. I don't really know why we're having this conversation. And at the end of the day, they're in the county right away. And if people want to see trees, come and see Quentin. You know, and he'll line you up with some trees to put on your property. Right?
Mr. Stevens next.
I guess I would be more of the middle ground there.
you are in the
Dozens,
middle of us, so.
dozens of reasons why we should remove trees. Sight lines at approaches, too close to the shoulder, roots interfering with culverts. The structure of the road.
That's a good one. I haven't thought of that one.
Public utilities, room for maintenance, snow clearing, dozens of reasons. But I sent an email to Andrew, and as far as I'm concerned, spraying for weeds in the ditches is non-negotiable. It has to continue. But when we look at this picture, so those trees are entirely too close to the road. I think we can all agree on that. What have we done? We've stunted their growth by spraying up 8 feet. If those trees are the problem, they need to be gone. And just spraying so some branches fall off and we get to pick them up later, I don't think that's the solution. So if they're 20 feet off the shoulder against the fence line, I don't know that we waste our time. We'd be more targeted for situations like this, but it needs to be a more wholesome. It needs to be clearing followed by spraying so they don't come up. When we get into the smaller trees, the brush, the saplings, the 4-footers, yeah, by all means, we can spray those and kill them before they creep in. But when it gets to this size, I think it makes a lot more sense to go in and mulching. And I realize there's a cost, but this did not kill a bunch of those trees. It may have stunted them, may have bought us a year or two, but it didn't kill them.
I think I'm gonna quickly jump into.
Sure. Take your advantage.
Nail on the head where it's buying some time, because, I mean, we can spray more ground than we can brush, so I think it keeps the encroachment from coming further until we can get to them. But Mr. Nyberg and Mr. Beaumont.
So, yeah, that's where I was going. And we can only brush so many miles every spring or every fall because of we got the frogs and the flowers and the birds that have to be taken care of in the spring, and we can't deal with that. And I get that. That's an environmental situation, and I'm cool with that. I totally understand. So we go hard every fall with our brushing program, and that is a decision that this council or this board can make to put forward to council that we want more money in our brushing program to brush more thing. And that's exactly what this is doing, is pushing this back so that these guys are not having to triple or quadruple the amount of brushing they do. And I'm cool with that. If that was the decision of the board that we were going to brush, but we made a conscious decision to say, deal with this. And that's how they dealt with it. And just to note, so I've been in the last 3 weeks, I have been in Paintearth County, Camrose County, Beaver County, Wetaskiwin County. Every one of them are doing exactly the same situation, So it's not just like us. It is an economic decision that has been made. And I get it, but don't make an economic decision and then come back and say, well, I don't like that decision. Well, you made the decision. I'm sorry. We as a collective made a decision that that's what we're going for. If you want to change it at budget time, you come to this table and you say, we need to increase the brushing program and we're going to get rid of the spraying program.
Okay, Mr. Beaumont.
Well, I was just going to report a little bit on what you see in this picture. A lot of what was already said. The goal in this picture is to get those young saplings, to keep a push back to buy us time. So a few of the larger trees have been sacrificed in that picture, but the idea is to keep the young growth from getting to the shoulder of the road. That's all I can do right now. So Public Works' crews can help out and brush the bigger stuff. Ideally, like I've said in the past, ideally what we do is we spray the brush, we kill the root, then we brush it, then we're done. If it's brushed first as a live tree, I have to wait for growth. I wait for 2 to 3 feet of tree, then I spray it, and I slowly kill off those saplings that are coming up. If I spray it first and kill the root ball, it's less trips.
That's a good point.
Okay. Any other discussion, I guess, on this point? Mr. Stevens?
One other point, going to Board Member Nyberg's about this being an economic decision. I agree, and I would like to have a longer conversation about that at budget time, because before we make the trigger to pull the trigger and go to more brushing units, perhaps we need to balance how much private land mulching we do. Maybe instead of increasing our workforce and our equipment, maybe we need to be focusing on public lands as opposed to private lands.
And the other one, Mr. Stevens, is we do have a number of brushing companies in our community that we could hire this out. So we could contract this out versus buying new equipment. And that is a discussion at budget time, absolutely.
Mr. Grover?
This is our problem. We have to switch the budget around to get the job done properly. Well, that's what we have to do.
See, Les isn't getting in on this because he has no trees down in his area. He didn't get any moisture down there, so he has no trees.
He's fond of all three of them.
I love trees,
Behind one.
but there's areas in like my ward too where they do encroach so much that it makes it difficult to move bigger machinery. So, I mean, it is good to keep them back. Mr. Dan?
Whoa.
And it's not so much a question of getting more machinery for this volume of brushing, if you want it taken care of, it's the right machinery. Like proper brushers, like an actual brusher. Because we have a bobcat with a brusher head. Those brusher heads they're made for bobcats.
Yeah.
Bobcats aren't made for them. They are, but they take a beat. The bobcats take a beat running those things.
So what would you suggest is like a small cat?
A small cat with a brusher head on it. It was years and years ago, and I have to do some homework, but many years ago, we went and demoed actual brushers. Like, that's all they do. Like,
Well,
they're tracked units, they're brushers, they're bigger than our bobcat, and they ditch line like that, you could literally just walk down.
Well, and I seen
Little
that
brushers, right?
CD came through, they had those machines.
There is a middle
Expensive.
between a dozer and a bobcat. You can get them on.
Yeah, there is definitely, yeah.
On reasonable sized loaders with the dedicated mulcher head. That's what private industry
It's
uses.
an option too.
You can get them all the way down to the size of our bobcat, but they're actually designed for it. And that machine that's designed for it will do 4 times as much as our bobcat. Same size machine, but that's what they're meant.
Okay, Mr. Grover?
Yeah, I was gonna go with that. I was there when they did that demonstration with the track. The only thing with your track thing, you have to load it, haul it ahead. Wheel loader, like, power companies use, we have 2 of them, that's right, too. And, you put a head on one of them, and that way then you're down the road at decent speed. And also when you get into this here type of stuff like this, it shreds it way, way better. Maybe that's what we look at. But what about the header on that? If you've got big stuff, the header, we already have a $70,000 header for that track hole.
And that thing's very useful when we get into steep ditches, things like that, or the taller trees.
Stuff like this, if we were talking about the tall trees, we already own it, we own that Volvo hole.
Yeah.
Good, I voted against to get the Volvo, but I guess you could use it for that, eh? You know, we already have that means to do it. Well, maybe we should look at something to put on one of those loaders. Take they can get the bucket off if they have to. And put a shredder on them and go shredding shred some of those trees and keep them off our right of way. What people do on their own land, I could care if they have trees right up to the fence, as long as they're not in the ditch.
What we have works, it's just if we want more volume.
Okay.
Mr. Gender, then Quentin.
I asked Dan to come in this morning because I just found that when we do the spraying, I'm not really sure if we're really set up in order to do any follow-up on it. We are gradually getting behind this. I remember 100 years ago where there weren't hardly any trees even around the center area. There was nothing down at Bymore NDA. It is a weed that we are not keeping up on. So like, and if we don't keep up on it, we are going to get that much further behind. And so like, if it comes to a track machine, it doesn't take bugger all nor to load those darn things onto a deck trailer or a ramp trailer in order to move them around. If this is a place where we have to go, if we don't get a handle on it now, you give it another 10 or 20 years when we're all gone out of here, it's going to be that much more of a problem then. So like, I'm just looking at, okay, what else can we really look forward to in order to get this problem and get a handle on it before we are going to be buried so deep. And like, there are trees like with this one that's showing in here now, and those are little saplings compared to like what Dan said, okay, you can run that machine down and take care of it in no time at all. Like, other than that, with the equipment that we have, it's going to take too darn long. We do need some better equipment, better way to handle this weed problem.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think the consensus is that the trees don't belong in the county right away. It's just the approach to move them out of there now. Quentin?
So I'm just getting a little bit of clarification with this picture shows what you guys don't want. If I'm understanding the direction that was given to me properly, you don't want this. You don't want tunnel vision.
Absolutely.
If I understand the direction properly, you want to push brush back. Last year's budget, you increased the herbicide by $100,000 for the purpose of brush removal. So last council meeting, the trucks were shut down. They have not moved. All three have been sitting. I'm looking for direction to continue what I was doing or to stop.
I'm not sure you got direction. I think that was a decision that was made by administration pending a decision made by council, because I think it was one or two individuals that maybe dictated what happened, and I don't necessarily think that's democracy, but.
It is not democracy. I'm going to make the motion now.
Go ahead.
I'll make the motion and we go back to doing what we were doing with a spray and what we had set in our budget, which was already set in budget, and carry on with it. And I can't see now, nobody's plowing snow. Roads are in pretty good shape. Why we don't start shredding right now?
Birds, the frogs.
Oh, we're good enough. Okay.
You're past bird and frog thing because I worked in
Actually, I'll double,
line. You're already past the bird and frog stage.
I'll double check.
Yeah, I think they're done nesting
You're
now.
good, man. Just keep going. Don't worry about it till the frog blows you over, okay? Okay. I'll make a motion. Go back with what he was instructed to do through the budget and through this board. Thank you.
Okay,
There, just need to vote on it.
any questions, Mr. Gender?
So clarification, okay, to what size of trees do we spray? And then how much do we spray that Dan and Public Works cannot keep up on as these trees die out in the future? So how much are we gonna put onto one, that is gonna be extra work onto another one?
I'm not sure you can dictate to them, don't spray a 3-foot tree, but a 4.5-foot tree, you can think. A lot of this is, if it happens to be a guilty tree and be beside a 3-foot tree, the 6-foot guy is going to get killed too, unfortunately. It's just the way that it is.
You have to remember with the 3-year program that was set up back in 2010 or 11, the center third of the county by far has the most brush. It also has the most ratepayers. So we did this program in the south third. Not as much brush was hit because there's not as much brush down there as there is here. I'll tell you now, to ease headaches, I won't spray more brush in the middle third, but what I will do is go back on what was sprayed and make sure that it's controlled. Because there are some trees, we've only done a single pass on the brush. There are some trees that when you're spraying the herbicide, there's no dye. It looks like water. So you don't know what was hit on that tree and what wasn't. So we do have to go back and do a second pass on some things. We'll make sure what was controlled is, or what was sprayed is controlled, but I won't make more work for Public Works this year. Is that fair?
See everyone?
But we can do what we've already done, right?
What was hit, I'll make sure is controlled.
Or are you done, Dave?
No, I'm not. So I'm gonna give you a special request for some bad corners and a couple of back roads that they are just this type of guys and they never spray.
Hey, you were done last year. This is our turn.
No,
Oh, okay.
no, this is my turn.
Oh, okay. All right. You're in the north side. You're talking on the north side of your area. Okay.
It'll be 3 straightening years before they come back. So I'd like it done now, because it didn't get done. Thank you.
Justin.
I do think, like, this picture is obvious that trees are entirely too close. But where we do have our wider right of ways, I think we can be more targeted. If they're 20 feet from the shoulder, I don't know if we need to be wasting our time.
But if they're 20 feet from the shoulder and they're only 6 foot today, and next year they're going to be 7 and 8, and the next year they're going to be 10, and then 3 years from now, when we come back, they're going to be a 12-foot tree, and we say, well, no, we don't want to deal with it. Like, I don't, like, we're micromanaging, honestly. We should be setting budget and telling these guys what to do instead of sitting here, okay, at 3.5 feet tree you can get, but if it's 3 feet 7 inches, by golly, don't spray it.
Mr. Grover, and then I think I'll let 2 more comments and then we'll move to the vote.
We had 60 grand left from a year ago that we didn't use. We're
I would have to go back and I don't remember.
around that.
It rolled over.
We didn't get, spray wasn't, we didn't put enough on, or you didn't whatever, I don't know. So anyhow, we should have lots of spray to do what we have to do. And, you know, we're down to where I got ratepayers that think maybe they'll shred it themselves if we can got the money to do it. But then they want to deal on their taxes, eh?
Mr. Gendrick?
I'm very much in support on what you've been doing, Quinn. I just don't want you to get so darn far ahead of, say, like Dan, and then Dan be sitting, now what do we do? So like, this is more between the two of you to work out on how to manage this so that if these trees start dying off and Dan isn't able to take care of it in time, they start falling onto the roads, that is where it's gonna be a burden onto Dan. So
Absolutely.
You can work it out, by all means, go for it.
And I guess Mr. Grover's motion, the gist of it is not to stop the halt that was put on after last meeting, to let the administration staff continue to do their job
Yeah, let the staff do their job.
under their best
Thank you.
discretion. Okay, is that clear for you guys? Okay, all in favor of that motion? Carried. Okay, new business, 8.1, recap of the farm to fork tour and long table dinner. Quentin, you'll have some more, you showed us some pictures, but you'll have a further recap to that day.
Where was that picture taken? With the tractor? I don't know.
Doesn't look like our.
Actually, I wouldn't say that's out by Hennels. That almost is where I'm thinking that was, but.
Okay. So Quentin,
So, the Farm to Fork tour was, what I would describe as a mad dash this year. Like driving chuck wagons because, we weren't doing it, and then we were. And it was it took some convincing to get some farmers who were wanting or able to open up their yards to having people come in. One, because of COVID, people were still nervous. Two, timelines were tight. They got stuff on the go, they're behind because of COVID, they were trying to get caught up. But we finally got some people together that were willing to open up their farms or their productions to show us what they had. And the guys liked it.
Yeah.
Like I said, the 44 people that were there absolutely loved what they saw. To give you a bit of what we did, left the shop, that was our starting point and our end point. So between every stop, I explained what the county did in ag services. We talked about weed inspections. We talked about the nasty weeds, the really nasty weeds, the nothing weeds. We talked about our rental equipment, what we have to offer the public. We talked about the controversial brush spraying and what the idea behind that was. We talked about workshops. We talked about education. We talked about how we advocate for
Producers.
and it created quite a conversation between each of our stops. And not once did I had a few questions that were kind of driving negativity, but for the most part, thank you. For the most part, it was
Where's most people from?
All over.
all over. There wasn't a most anywhere. There was Edmonton, Red Deer, Calgary, Lethbridge, Lloydminster, Vermilion, County of Stettler, Town of Stettler.
How did these people, like, back us up a little bit?
So
So
found out about us.
how did they find out about the tour and what did it cost them for the tour? So
When you, for the lack of better words to use, when you Google Open Farm Days, we pop up
okay.
along with
I don't know.
how many other municipalities do this.
Yeah.
As well as Elvis or Acres can go on himself and register his farm. Hey, come look at me. So there's a whole bunch of guys wanting people to see their place, a whole bunch of municipalities making farm tours or organizing a bunch of stops without a tour in place, all on the Alberta website. If you Google Open Farm Days, it's all loaded there. The Board of Trade also put out a whole bunch of advertising, and I'm not sure where all they hit. We advertised in some papers, we put it on Facebook, we put it on,
So
don't know about Twitter.
So Billy's up in Edmonton, says we're gonna go to the farm tour in Stettler, Alberta. What does he do? What's his next step? He wants to take the family, him and the two kids, and they're coming down, they're gonna stay at the Ramada and they're gonna hang out for the weekend here.
They would go to the Board of Trade online, register their names, how many people are doing bus tour, long table dinner, or both.
What
Because
tour cost them?
I don't remember, to do both was $75, and I feel like the long table dinner was 60 or 62. There was a deal, you got a discount if you did both. I feel like it was $20, but I'm sorry, I don't know that number right now.
No, fair enough, that's good.
Um,
I was just inquiring, because
so when I asked where people were from, I would pick on,
It's $25 for just the VIP tour.
okay, that's the bus tour.
Yeah.
Okay.
so when I would find out who the Vermilion person was or Edmonton, I always asked them, why? Why here? A lot of the times, why not? I saw my local one, I wanted to go somewhere else and see what they had.
I just wondered where we compare for price wise too to somebody else. Like if you went to Wetaskiwin County, if they would charge you the same or equivalent or whatever.
I can maybe do some historical searching on that for next meeting, see what we charged versus other counties. The long table dinner, relatively speaking, was about the same from past budgeting. But as per your direction, we weren't involved really in the long table dinner. Other than our meeting with Board of Trade was long table dinner and bus tour, so we heard some of the stuff going on, but we didn't help like organize that piece, right? Because the direction was to focus on the bus tour, and that's what we did.
And it looks like you got fan mail. I think these are all on social media after the event. I seen some of these popped up, and so it was favorable comments. But kudos to the County of Stellar number 6 Ag Operations team for a fabulous farm tour yesterday. Quentin Beaumont was an informative and entertaining host throughout the day, and many thanks to the host families. And I think that there's more of those comments.
They changed how you spell your name, but that's okay.
Well,
That's cool.
that was one of the people that went on it, I think, sent those pictures in.
Yes.
Very cool.
And thanks to Public Works for helping us out because I didn't have enough staff on my own to do it. So Public Works had some interest in giving up a long Saturday to get this done. Everything we toured goes back to long table events where it's ingredients within 100 miles. We used Detention Brewery this year. I had Stettler Brewing Company on board, interested for the most part to go. 3 weeks before, they had a technical difficulty. I don't know if it was a brewing side of things or a registration thing. They had to pull out of the long table dinner and the bus stop. We had planned them for the lunch, but Detention Brewery out of Roseland, which is, I think it was 72 kilometers or something from here, said, "You bet, we'll come," and it was a hit. In fact, I had some say that they wished lunch was 2 hours.
Yeah, because they supply booze.
Yeah,
It
exactly.
was hot, and it was, then the beer was cold, and everybody kept saying it was delicious.
Well, that's good.
That's the one negative part to, working the tours. You're watching everybody have the cold drinks and you can't indulge with them.
Were you a more entertaining guy post lunch break at the brewery, or just out of curiosity?
Seemed to be a kid all day. They were excited when they knew that there was 2 drink stops, lunch and winery. Back to back was great for them by the sounds of it.
So 40 as many on the bus as you can get, or can you get more?
It was a 56 seater,
Okay.
so I could have 54,
Okay. Including staff.
excluding
You have-
staff. I kept 2 seats for staff on the bus.
Good enough. Yeah.
And then we had county trucks piloting the bus driver, so he didn't have to worry about where he was going. Coolers, we went through 24 bags of ice that day,
Oh,
keeping drinks and snacks cool.
Good.
Are there more slides, Andrew, on that?
So this is a
Comment on
social media. His local person now, taking over her dad's garden and something. But Mr. Seibel had a big garden that she is really interested in pushing forward by the sounds of it.
Yeah, so there's more favorable comments there, and then there's another one directed to me because I give the address on behalf of the county.
Oh, yeah, it's all about.
Well, I was just sharing it so that, because it says thanks to all at the county who organized it, so I think it's important that when we get these favorable comments to share it with our county staff. Yeah. And so I told her I would pass it on. And anything further to add, Clinton, on the long table? Farm tours.
Just like everything else we do, it's always a pile of work leading up to it, but once you see it through, it was very positive.
Staff was happy about it, fun time.
Was happy about it, absolutely.
We gotta do some of that more, get the opportunity to, it's a win. This is, for me, this I see as county in a good light is a win for us. And kudos for the staff that helped out. That's awesome.
I did attend the supper. My wife and I, Larry was unable to attend, the Reeve was unable to attend, so as ASB chairman, I was asked to attend and represent the county at the supper, and I gave some words. But sitting at the supper, we sat, there was a few couples from Red Deer that sat near us, and they had nothing but positive things to say about it. And then before supper, I was visiting with people along the table, and again, very favorable comments. A few of them commented on Quentin Beaumont, that he was an excellent host, that he was very informative, he was very pleasant and enjoyable, and he did a great job of hosting. And so,
Must be a different Quentin than we do.
so basically, congratulations, Quentin, on the good reviews, and thank you for being such a great ambassador for the county. I mean, you were the county face that day on the tour, and the people were impressed for sure with our county. And so there was a ton of favorable comments. So thank you for your good work on that one.
It's all up, the staff did all the work. All I had to do was talk.
Yeah, well, I guess you did a good job because they were impressed. So was there any other questions on that tour? Nope. Okay, we'll move on then.
No, carry on.
I think he said no. We'll move on to 8.2.
You guys didn't get here, John, the Apple.
Yeah.
Yeah, but whatever, just, you know. Hey, nice to have you.
8.2 is the RMA Uniquely Rural. Yesterday, 4 members from RMA joined Quentin and Nikki, and they did the program they're doing now is a shoot to feature agriculture in the province. And County of Stellar was one of 9 municipalities in the province chosen to do a video shoot for, I guess, highlighting agriculture. And so as ASB chairman, I hosted the group at our farm, and they spent a few hours there. I guess probably maybe 4 hours. And it was a pretty great day, I thought. Quentin can probably fill in the gaps. The video will be used as a promotion across the province, and also at election time to showcase agriculture to our urban candidates that are running for positions in government. So, would you like to add anything, Quentin?
Yeah, the RMA staff showed up about 10 o'clock, so we had, I think, about not quite 2.5 hours of photos and footage, video taken, interview questions. They're going to compile it down to a 1-minute commercial, I guess you would call it. There was some interesting questions, but I think we had the right spokesman to really showcase Stetter County, our region, and what agriculture is all about. So looking forward to seeing that video. We should get it shortly, I guess. And they did seven stops this year. We were the 7th of the stops.
I thought it was 9, but maybe it was 7 or 9.
9.
Yeah, I thought it was 9, but anyway.
So yeah, it's going to be interesting what's put together and how it's presented.
Yeah.
I do believe Mr. Stuhlberger is going to request some bodyguards for RMA because he's going to have a lineup of autographs.
Doubt that.
So
But one of their questions, which I thought was quite good, I guess, is that they asked what I thought the misconceptions about agriculture were. So, like, agriculture run for years with really under the radar, no problems. And all of a sudden now in recent years, there's all these misconceptions about how agriculture is destroying the environment and this, that, and the other things. So I think it's time we set the record straight, and I guess it's time we educate people. So I had some comments on that one as well.
Well, and I think it's important we do that. I know there's a number of social media gurus that we've seen out there at some of our events that are really trying to work on keeping and taking back that social license, right? Because farmers did forever. It was, the mom and pop organization, and you know, it was wholesome and the whole 9 yards. And somewhere along the line, we lost that. And I think farmers need to be very cognizant of the fact that as much as we have social license, we can lose it very quickly with a number of bad stories within the media, right? I mean, we've all seen them where PETA has done a stupid, what I will call a slam video, and you know they'll try to highlight the worst of it. What you see is that one cow that was a downer cow. What you don't see is the thousands and thousands of others that are, you know, living a good quality life out in the field and just not stressed, right? So it's important that we do this. It's very important.
Something else I actually mentioned to Mrs. Stover just before the meeting started. I had the privilege of going to Victoria earlier this year, and we were on a wine tour, and of the 3 wine vineyards we stopped at, the third one, they talked about wanting to be an organic vineyard, but they couldn't. This whole valley where I think there's 30 vineyards in this valley, none of them can become organic because they're in the flight path of the Victoria Airport. And the fuel emissions, the pollution, they actually had some monitors put up on these vineyards, and it's actually monitoring, and there's accumulations from the jets. And because of the organic standards, they can't make organic wine. So they got creative. Well, we're not your conventional vineyard. We don't use herbicides. We're doing these certain things to make us as clean as possible, but we can't make organic values because of this. So they made their own little niche market. And I don't recall what they called it, but they're doing what they can to keep as clean as possible, even though others around them are affecting their product. And that comes back to what we were talking about, you know, like agriculture is being hit on lots because I was going to say willy-nilly, but someone will pick that up. We blanket spray, we use too much fuel, there's emissions from our cows that are wrecking the planet, but there's other things affecting agriculture that a lot of us really don't see. I never thought once about an airport and however many planes landing in a day, taking off in a day, affecting a vineyard, yet alone a crop. And it wasn't until we were sitting there and then there was a plane come into land, and it was like, that makes total sense. But they're doing what they can to get the best product out of their vineyard with what's being put on them. And it just kind of opened my eyes to a whole new ball of wax that agriculture has to deal with, right? You can't affect the 7,500 trucks going past your crop every day, or planes or whatever. Everything is accounted for, and we have to do with what we can at best stewardship to our best productivity we can. I don't know, like it's just one of those things, right?
That's right. I think we started, I think that's probably it for this one, but we're going to run into lunch a few minutes here to finish this meeting up. And actually, this is a good segue. Andrew, could you bring up that video? I think it's only a minute or less than 2-minute video, but it's a good segue to some of the misconceptions on agriculture and the airplane stuff that Clinton was talking about. So this is a fellow, he's a farmer.
Did you know that a Boeing 747 commercial airliner burns 14,400 liters of fuel an hour? So let's put this into perspective. So on an 8-hour flight, that plane will burn 115,000 liters of fuel. Now I'm going to show you how much fuel that we have burned in a year and a half farming 6,000 acres. Once again, this is a year and a half worth of fuel consumption. 77,891 liters. Now that includes 2 seasons of seeding, 1 season of harvest, a year and a half's worth of chemical spraying, a year and a half's worth of rock picking, 2 seeding seasons worth of rolling, and probably 2 solid months worth of trucking. I might be missing some things, but I'm about to list all the equipment that we put fuel in. So there's 4 diesel trucks, 3 4-wheel drive tractors, 2 that pull seeders, 1 988B cat loader, a sprayer, 3 semis, 2 combines, 2 front wheel assist tractors, and 1 without front wheel assist. Oh, and a skid steer. This one burns the most fuel, around 400 liters a day. And these ones burn 300 to 350 liters a day versus 14,400 liters an hour. So remind me again, how is agriculture the problem?
Can you send us that? I would definitely
That's worth sharing.
push that out. Yeah, absolutely.
Anyways, okay. Now we'll move to 10. I guess that should be 10.1 and 10.2. Year-to-date financials and budget. 2023 budget.
So year-to-date financials, just pulling out the, oh, you have it. Advertising, we did a lot of advertising this year. Walker Well had some more than normal vandalism to put us a little over. Rodent control, I'm 294% over budget, but Chris explains that's a strychnine thing from prior.
What are they doing at the Walker Well? I thought we've opened it up and there's no lock or anything on it.
Free water, but we decided a post gets you better free water. I didn't take pictures, I should have, but they even get inside and they use a fire extinguisher and they color my walls, so they're all nicely yellow.
We gotta get that camera. We should be buying 2 of them.
When you drive by it on the highway, county staff is down there regularly cutting the grass. There isn't one blade out of place around the well. It looks great. It's just so sad that someone takes it upon themselves to vandalize it.
Overall, we're 53%, and this is to the end of July, so we are, for the lack of better words, pretty well bang on target with that. Any questions there?
Mr. Maverick?
So the Walker Well, this has been an ongoing issue. Do we close it?
Talked about that.
I mean, if the locals are not going to take care of it and take care of the individuals that are doing this, maybe we close it and let them figure it out. I mean, there has to be some cost and consequence of this, right? Like we can't continue to pour money at these things and just not deal with it. You're the area councillor, what is the consequence of shutting it down?
Well, they're gonna have to buy it. Because, I mean, for spraying, they don't mind buying water because it's cleaner, like pure and everything, but if they're hauling for cattle and stuff, I don't think they'd want to buy so much, so. But I can kind of question around how many people are using it and what their thoughts are, and we don't have it open in the winter time because we don't heat it. It's just open through summer months. Yeah.
Yeah, all 3 are the same. We'll shut them down close to freezing, so Thanksgiving-ish.
Maybe we need to make a statement, if it continues to be vandalized, we are going to have to shut it down.
Would we put a sign on it if that's what is going down?
Yeah, I think we should give them another chance, and warning too.
But put a sign like that, if this continues to be vandalized, it will be shut off.
That discussion has to be had. Yeah.
That's probably a good idea.
How far is it from that well to the bulk station?
It's not well. It's not a center between it.
So how far is it?
Yeah, 4 miles. Like, I mean, that's not.
It's 4 miles a distance. Yeah.
It's not-
We're not talking 25 or 30 miles. We're talking.
Distance isn't the issue. It's the free versus the pay, I guess.
But you can't put water to cows and make any sense out of the dollars it costs to water. So that's the thing.
Even at the trucking, it's gotta cost you some.
Oh. But you know what, that's one or two.
When you get years like last year,
Vandalism to it and wrecks it for the whole works, but
Yeah.
I mean, maybe put up a sign that it continues to be vandalized, that we're gonna shut it off.
okay, Mr. Gender?
So do we make a motion to quit, like going with Dave's?
Yeah, that's probably
I'll
appropriate.
make that motion, okay? For you.
Or just the one tank loader have a sign, or put it all,
I don't think we have a problem in anywhere else, right?
Just wait till.
just making sure I'm clear on what I'm doing.
Okay.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried. That was the right spot for the motion, because we're right in the middle of this, we'll do it anyway.
I'll make a motion to move the financial thing to
The year-to-date budget.
year-to-date budget.
Okay, Mr. Grover moves the year-to-date, all in favor? Carried. Okay, 2023 budget. Was there anything further you were?
So I just putting final touches on my budget. I just want clarification. Last ag meeting, we talked about the idea of costing out another side-by-side trailer and truck. I'll get quotes for that. Am I still putting in the budget for discussion to replace a roadside spray truck? Because that kind of got a little gray, whether it was whoa on that and do this. So I just want to bring it back and just get clarification.
As far as I'm concerned, put it in there and then we'll decide at budget time what we're doing. That would be.
I know it's a lot of work, Quentin, but it is,
We need
we
all
need
the
the options
information.
without knowing it. We need the information.
Without, till we move the budget, we won't know.
I'd hate for it not to be there when we have room.
That's fair
budget.
enough, but if we're more-
Yeah,
That's all, that's what I just wanted to bring back and double check.
yeah, it should be in there. Okay, that was it for your budget?
Yeah.
So I guess we received for information that discussion that we had. Mr. Grover? All in favor? Carried. Next meeting is September 28th. For seminars and workshops, conferences, we have the Central Region ASB Conference in Macomb on November 2nd. Our in-camera session will include a resolution discussion. So I need someone to move us in camera. Mr. McKay? All in favor? Dustin has moved to set a camera. Our last order of business is an adjournment.
Do we need to make a motion?
Yeah, we should make a motion to have a
resolution.
adopt the resolution.
I'll make the motion, go ahead. I'll make the motion that we adopt the resolution with the additional background information to bring to the next Central Alberta Service Board Conference on November 2nd, 2022.
Ready? All in favor? Carried. Now the adjournment motion.
Adjournment.
Can I find a person to do that? Mr. Grover returns, all in favor?